Everyone, Patrick CK here. Most multi-channel dashcams on the market treat side coverage as an afterthought. You usually get a front lens, a rear lens, and maybe an interior cabin camera if you're lucky. But standard setups are completely blind to what's happening directly next to your car, which is exactly where a massive chunk of road rage incidents and side swipes actually happen. That's why we're looking at this, the Botslab G980H. It's a true 4-channel system featuring dedicated modular side-mounted cameras. It's massive, it's heavy, and it's easily one of the most interesting pieces of recording hardware I've put in my car recently. Let's unbox it, break down the actual hardware specs, and talk about why this form factor changes the typical installation process. Botslab layered the unboxing nicely. Up top is the standard accessory pack, static cling stickers, spare mounting pads, a microfiber cloth, and the usual documentation. On top of the main camera is the included Botslab branded 128GB micro SD card. A nice gesture, though with 4 active channels writing data simultaneously, you'll want to upgrade to the 512GB maximum pretty quickly. Handling the main unit, the build quality feels solid. No misaligned panels or cheap plastic creaks, and no gaps. The main front-facing lens uses a f1.8 aperture and 6-layer optics, and it surprisingly pivots in all 4 directions so you can dial in your framing perfectly. On both sides are USB-C ports to interface with the wing cameras. On the bottom is a dedicated manual record button. On top is the micro SD card slot. And on the back is a 3.18-inch touchscreen display. One thing that stands out is the input for the rear camera. For some reason, instead of the standard USB-C like the rest of the chassis, Botslab uses a proprietary connection, an annoying choice that limits repairability. The real selling point of the G980H is the dual side-mounted wing cameras. They connect via USB-C, but Botslab also integrated a magnetic alignment system into the housing. The magnets are keyed. They'll actually physically resist you trying to snap them on in the wrong direction. This magnetic integration is excellent because it takes the mechanical stress off of the physical USB-C port itself. Once they're clicked into place, they stay securely seated, though I'll be testing them over some rough potholes to see if they hold their position over time. The lenses rotate independently inside their housing, so you can point one inward toward the cabin and the other one outward to catch side approaching vehicles. The internal rotation resistance could be a little bit tighter to guarantee zero drift over time, but the overall fit and finish is remarkable. Down in the bottom of the box is the rear camera, a pretty bog standard setup. And lastly, the power plug, a 12-volt adapter with an integrated cable and a single USB-A port on top for any accessories. I'm not a big fan of the integrated cable here, and I suspect the 12-volt adapter will need updating soon, as many modern cars no longer have 12-volt outlets up front. They've been relegated almost exclusively to the cargo area now. Let's cut through the standard marketing and look at what this hardware is actually delivering. Funny enough, even figuring out what sensor is in this thing took some digging. One of Botslab's own marketing listings claimed the front camera is powered by Sony IMX415. But when I asked Botslab directly, their team confirmed it's actually the SC501AI CMOS image sensor from SmartSense, a 5-megapixel sensor designed specifically for industrial security cameras, which claims strong low-light performance. And that answer checks out, because the SC501AI's native resolution lines up exactly with what this camera records, an interesting 3K 2880 by 1620 resolution for the main camera, while the others record in 1080p. The marketing around getting 560 degrees of coverage is physically impossible. You're getting full 360 degree coverage with overlapping angles, which is great. But labeling it 560 degrees is just playing with the math. On a positive note, the camera uses an internal supercapacitor instead of a standard lithium battery. That lets the unit operate safely in extreme temperatures, from -4 Fahrenheit or -20 Celsius up to 158 Fahrenheit or 70 Celsius, without the risk of swelling or catastrophic data loss during a sudden power failure. It also features basic voice commands for hands-free photo capture and video locking, an integrated high-precision GPS module for real-time speed and coordinate overlays, and a smart G-sensor pre-recording feature. If the camera detects a collision, it locks the footage moving forward and retroactively saves the 8 seconds of cached video before the impact occurred, so you have full context of the incident. Botslab also offers 24/7 parking monitoring, but you'll need to install a dedicated hardware kit if you want to tap into the time-lapse or motion-activated Sentry modes. Let's get this installed. Before we stick this to the windshield, we need to talk about the installation geometry. Because with both of those wing cameras attached, this system gets wide. If you try to mount this where you'd put a standard slimline dashcam to the right of the rearview mirror, you're likely to completely block or severely obstruct the field of view of one of the side wing cameras. If I didn't have this sizable shroud covering my sensor cluster, I'd mount it a little higher up, but this is really the only place that's going to work to get all the right angles. We'll see how it looks once it's installed. For the installation, you'll simply prep the windshield for the static stickers, mount the camera, and route the power cable along your headliner and down the A-pillar. If you want a full step-by-step on hiding the wiring and removing things like the glove box, I covered all of that when I installed the Viofo A229 Plus in a previous video, plus a write-up over on my website. Links below. One disconcerting thing for me is that the power cable was barely long enough to reach the 12-volt outlet in my center console, and I drive a small car. If you have a larger vehicle and your only 12-volt outlet is in the center console, I don't think you'll have enough length here. Take some measurements first and make sure the 11-foot 3.3 meter cable will actually reach. Other dash cams I've used have shipped with at least a 15-foot 4.57 meter cable. Over on the rear camera, I ran into one more catch. I had to flip it around to get the image the right way up. And that leaves the power cable coming out the wrong side. So it has to wrap back around the camera and then down the way I got it routed. There's no option in the app to fix that either, which is just another oversight. Afterwards, I also added some cable clips to tidy up the routing. For some reason, the cables didn't want to stay in the headliner, and for a few bucks, these worked great. Link below. With everything in place, the only real downside is the sightline. Because it needs a clear line of view for every camera, it sits pretty prominently, and around tight bends or corners, I have a feeling I'll need to look around the unit to get the best visibility. With everything installed, let's fire up the dashcam for the first time. For managing footage on the fly, the 3.18-inch display supports a native 4-way split-screen playback. If you're ever in an accident or dealing with an immediate roadside incident, you can review every single angle simultaneously without clicking through endless submenus. After a little while, the split screen gives way to a screensaver showing the time and dates, and it still indicates everything's recording, which is nice to have. My first drive after installing was around my favorite park near Atlanta, and first impressions of the footage are pretty good. It's sharp with solid dynamic range. I wouldn't call it true HDR, but I can see into the shadows and the highlights aren't blown out. It looks good even rolling up on this car. License plate readability is decent. I won't say great, but decent. This was actually about the best case scenario for this camera. It's slightly overcast, so we don't get a lot of lens flare from the sun. There is some extra processing that you can see, especially on power lines and foliage. but it's not as bad as I've seen in other dash cams, where the playback can look extremely crunchy. I took my typical drive into the North Georgia mountains to let the dash cam breathe a little. This day wasn't as cloudy, and moving in and out of the shadows was brutal with the reflections of the dash in the footage. A CPL filter would definitely help here. The interior of my car is usually dark because of my tint, and that shows up in how the IR sensor handles it. Everything comes out a bit purple. The footage from both wing cameras isn't the crisp image that the marketing tries to display, but it's serviceable. The angles are the real win here, covering the sides and even the back. If other cars or people come up on either side of you, you're going to see them. After pulling the footage on my computer, something did stand out. All of the cameras record at just 25 FPS. That's the only option available. The lower FPS didn't feel like much of an issue on the front or wing cameras, but for some reason, it's very apparent on the rear camera footage. It almost feels like it's running at even less than 25 FPS. Still, it's usable, and a rear camera is better than none. I'm fairly sure it's a bin part that other dashcams use rather than a bespoke piece, which is somewhat understandable, but at this camera's price point, it's a bit disappointing. Of course, where most dashcams fall short is at night, and unfortunately, this one is no different. For the main camera, the low light performance of that f1.8 aperture is not terrible, but not great. We're driving around in the early morning, and the sky actually pops really well, since that's basically the only source of light beyond the car's own headlights. The processing is minimal, so all the frames still look pretty clean. There's some motion blur in the dark areas, but you can't really ask for too much where there simply isn't any light. The wing cameras and the rear cameras do unfortunately fall pretty short. Without much light, it's hard to get very good footage out of these small sensors. On the interior, with the infrared lens, you can make me out, but anything moving outside the car is pretty much a messy blur. If someone came up to the side of the car in these conditions, it could be difficult to see them unless you turn on an interior light of some kind. Where I see the biggest struggle in these conditions is the rear camera. Even at slow speeds, there's a lot of motion blur, and when we pass under a street lamp, it's completely blown out. There's really not a whole lot you can do here. If there's a car behind you, their headlights blow out and blind the camera. And that lower frame rate really hurts it as well. Again, this feeds right back into my thought that this rear camera is very much an afterthought on this dashcam. And because it's a proprietary connection, you can't upgrade it in the future. Now for my standard license plate readability test. I set up a plate on a stand and moved it back from the camera at roughly 5-foot increments until the characters are no longer readable. In the day, it looks really good at 5, 10, and even 15 feet. At 20 feet, it starts to lose a little detail, but it's still legible. At 25 feet, you can make out some of the characters, not perfectly clear though. And at 30 feet, if you don't already know what the plate says, you're not going to make it out. At night, it actually holds up better than I expected. It's still pretty legible at 15 and even 20 feet. And 25 is almost there. I do have to be upfront though, these are about as close to perfect conditions as it gets. The plate isn't moving, there's no traffic, and there are no other headlights washing it out. Out on the actual road, it's not this clean. But even with that caveat, this is a better performer than a lot of dash cams I've tested, especially at night. Bottom line, during the day, everything is perfectly usable. At night, the main camera carries it. But either way, you're getting that wide coverage most other dash cams can't even touch. On the wireless side, it's equipped with a 5.8 GHz Wi-Fi chip, which should mean faster speeds than 2.4 GHz and quicker downloads to your phone from the app. Speaking of which, let's check out the app. Right away, we're not off to a good start. Apparently, you need a Botslab account just to connect to your own dashcam. I created one and moved on. Since the Wi-Fi is always on, it's a straightforward process. After scanning the dashcam's QR code, it detects the camera, adds it to your account, and drops you in the dashboard. First thing I changed was the recording length. I'm not sure why 1 minute is always the default on dashcams, but we're knocking that up to 5 minutes. Poking around the rest of the settings, it's a fairly feature-rich app that feels modern. There was an ad on the first screen, but thankfully, I don't see them anywhere else. When reviewing the footage, there's a nice little interface with a map in the corner and some telemetry. And of course, you could download any clip to your phone if you need it. Overall, in terms of user experience and sheer number of options, this is one of the better apps I've come across from a dashcam manufacturer. The one thing I wish I could change is the screensaver brightness on its own. During the day, it's fine, but at night, it's quite bright. You can turn the overall brightness down, but that also dims the camera views, which isn't super helpful. A dedicated setting just for the screensaver would be nice. Otherwise, I'll just end up turning that feature off. If you're looking for a dashcam that can cover a full 360 degrees of your car's interior and exterior, I think the Botslab G980H is a great choice. Of course, just be aware of its limitations at night, which most dashcams do struggle with, and that shorter power cable. I'm curious to see how the next generation of sensors like Sony's StarViz 3 will perform once it arrives. That'll show up in higher end dashcams first, of course, but it should eventually trickle down to the more affordable ones. As always, I'll leave links to everything in the description. If you enjoyed this content, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this has been Patrick CK. Goodbye.